Welcome back to the Funding the Commons Virtual Summit. For those of you just joining us, this event is centered on new models of public goods funding. I'd like to welcome our first speaker in this session, Raul Jordan. Raul is co-founder of Prismatic Labs and an Ethereum core developer, and he's going to tell us the story of a network-funded team, how Prismatic Labs developed Prism and other public goods using new funding mechanisms. Welcome, Raul.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Okay, great. So I'll get started. Let me share my screen. Okay, everything good to go?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Great. So thank you, everyone. My name is Raul Jordan. I am co-founder of Prismatic Labs, one of the developers that worked on Ethereum proof of stake and still working on bringing that to the entirety of the Ethereum network happening next year. So a lot of big things are happening, and really it wouldn't be possible were it not for the continued support from the Ethereum community, especially I'd say the Ethereum Foundation that has put together a very aggressive campaign towards public goods funding. We've been very grateful to, as one of the earliest grant recipients from the Ethereum Foundation. And really that relationship that we built over the long term helped us really break into the industry, bring in new talent, and also just give back and try to make an impact into this technology. So I'll chat about kind of our story, how we got here, why we did it, some of the lessons learned about what works and maybe what doesn't work in an open public goods funding environment. And wrapping up with some tips for other teams that might be thinking about going down this route. So, my team, Prismatic Labs, we basically are fully grant funded, and we created this project called Prism, which is currently the most popular Ethereum 2.0 implementation. So today, Ethereum is upgrading to this massive multi-year roadmap where a lot of things will change. Namely, we're going to be transitioning off proof of work, and instead going into a more environmentally friendly and more robust implementation of proof of stake. So we've been working on this since the start of 2018. We started in a completely grassroots manner. So we assembled only from basically open source volunteers that we found on the internet. Today, we shipped Prism Ethereum proof of stake phase 0 in December 1st of 2020. And at the time of writing, there's probably over $25 billion worth of ETH at stake today. So a non-trivial amount of people are actually staking on mainnet today and trusting our software and trusting other team software with this big responsibility. And we wouldn't have imagined really reaching this point when we first got started on this idea. So kind of why did we start, right? To us, really, Ethereum is one of the most interesting blockchain projects. It has the biggest developer community and really feels like a place where developers can thrive. Everyone that we met in the beginning was super welcoming. Like, most important conversations were done in the open, and we felt that we could really come in and and build and do something with everyone's support. Basically, it was at the start of 2018 when really a lot of builders were looking into Ethereum from the promise of its technology, and everyone was talking about what the technology is missing to really make it big. Everyone was talking about how scalability is not here yet, how we want to move to proof of stake, how come it hasn't happened yet, and really all these problems that people were talking about, and a lot of developers on the sidelines were curious about, but never really had an opportunity to tackle, right? So I was kind of asking that question to myself. I was like, why is really nobody working on this? Who is building out scalability? Who is building out proof of stake? And the answer was a few people were interested in it, but I couldn't really find any serious effort or push towards doing this, right? So I started voicing a message on different places, such as Reddit, Discord, GitHub, and just asking, hey, does anyone want to work together on something like this, right? I was really fortunate to find, some of the core members of my team from the very beginning that were just interested in thinking the same things. Really, one thing that we notice is that when there are difficult problems, there will always be really great people willing to tackle them. And I think that Web3 offers this kind of this foundation where people can come together and you can meet people you would never imagine working with and really work towards a common mission. So I sent out this email kind of back in the day, and kind of that's what led us to where we are today. At the time, basically, the only thing that existed regarding like, ETH2 was this FAQ that Vitalik put together. It was called the sharding FAQ. So it explains kind of like, what would a scalable Ethereum layer 1 look like? And at the time, there was kind of like, there were a lot of fuzzy concepts. Nobody really wrote this out in like a more like a formal specification. And this is what we had to work with, right? We were like, okay, there are a lot of ideas floating around. How do we actually do some work? How do we actually put something together? What was really awesome is that, our team, we started building out a prototype of this FAQ. And at the same time, this is when an opportunity really came to us. We noticed that in January 2nd of 2018, the Ethereum Foundation announced that they're doing, a development subsidy program, essentially a public grants program. The idea was that they think it's really important to outsource a lot of the difficult problems in core development to the community, right? Like teams from the community could apply and work on solving, on basically providing scaling proposals to the Ethereum blockchain. This was awesome news. It was like really one of the first time that we had, a grant program of this size really being done in such a transparent manner. So of course, we applied. We were very fortunate to be one of the first recipients of the program. And we did so because we had a prototype to show. A lot of us were just volunteering and doing this for fun, and we kind of had something basic to show at the time. And really this allowed us to continue and pursue this as a serious effort. So basically, as of December 1st of 2020, we shipped the first phase of ETH proof of stake. It was approximately 20,000 validators, each with 32 ETH on mainnet. Today, a large amount of ETH is at stake, but still only a small amount of the ETH supply. And full proof of stake to Ethereum is coming in Q1 of 2022. So it's really been quite a long journey, and here we are. Cool. So how has, I guess, the grants program in Ethereum evolved over time? One thing that's really interesting is that you'll find a super broad ecosystem that grants support. You'll find everything from like really hardcore cryptography to something as basic but impactful as translating educational materials for, into different languages. I think that Ethereum really does offer an opportunity for everyone, and the fact that there is no aspect of the whole stack that is not covered by the grants ecosystem makes it really special. I think that anywhere from individuals that want to make an impact and break in to more serious teams that have very interesting proposals are able to receive funding from the Ethereum Foundation and other organizations to really make this happen. So to us, that was super encouraging, and just seeing that grow over time made things just that much more rewarding and interesting. Of course, grants are not guaranteed. So one of the big challenges of working basically as a fully funded grant team is that you don't have a guarantee that there will be a next one, right? It's not like you're receiving, so it's not like you're raising a seed round and you're on tradition, going to a Series A round or raising money in that way, or for example, making revenue, for example, like there may not be a next one, which I think is a double-edged sword. I guess in some ways it encourages teams to really try their best to make sure that they work and they meet the milestones. But of course, there is no guarantee. One other thing is that retaining talent can be difficult. Of course, like we see how much Web3 popularity has skyrocketed over the past few years, and really having people stay focused and stay working on a grant-funded project can be difficult compared to alternatives that exist in the market today. I do think, however, that some of the hardest problems problems and teams that are working on them have a really good moat to retain talent as some of the best talent wants to continue working on difficult problems. So based on our experience, here is what I would say I consider as important elements of successful public funding ecosystems. And I think that this is from the perspective of being a grantee, and also from what I see as being an effective grantor. So some of the elements I believe are important are being value driven, right? So for the grantor perspective, say you're creating a public goods funding environment, like you think hard about why are you doing this, right? Why is it important? A lot of the times it's, is it to actually solve some very difficult problems in the space and outsource that to the community? Or is it just for the sake of building community, as an end in itself, right? Another aspect is there enough funding for folks to make a full-time leap into building Web3? Third, I think empowering newcomers to learn and make an impact is super important. To be honest, a lot of us, when we first got started in Ethereum, we were pretty new to crypto. I think a lot of us, we had a software engineering background. We had worked in Web2 companies or startups, but it was the first time we were learning a lot of the jargon and terminology that was being thrown around in core development, right? And even more amazing is that even within a few months that we're working on this, we were as deep as you can possibly go. We were working with some of the existing Ethereum researchers and core devs, at a research summit, chatting about the roadmap of the project. So really knowing that you have this huge welcoming environment to newcomers was very refreshing, right? And fourth here is we believe that a really good public goods funding ecosystem encourages teams to tackle the hardest problems, right? So for example, giving agency, we're opening up grants to like this super difficult technical problem, right? Can you guys apply and do it? I think is very special. And compared to like, for example, just outsourcing some tooling or some application layer work to grants. Part two is, on the grantee side, I think it's also very important to build long-term incentives for them. It's very important to have a long-term game where they keep shipping really good quality work, they keep getting recognized, and they keep getting supported. And they also have some incentives where, like, if that multiply beyond just getting a cash salary. So if their work is impactful enough to really push the technology forward, right? Both the grantor and the grantee should win from the collaboration. We believe that another important aspect, which could be a little bit controversial, is we think that healthy competition here is super important, and a grant system that encourages that stands to win a lot from it. So for example, like by opening up a difficult problem to a team and to multiple teams, you can have different teams competing based on merit on the best solution. And I think that's a really good way to add kind of pressure in an open source ecosystem, and also find the optimal approach. It also helps weed out maybe teams that might not be as serious about working on something versus teams that really want to solve a problem, right? And third, I believe a healthy ecosystem also encourages the teams to find sustainable revenue beyond grants, right? So like grants are not forever. What can they do beyond that? And I think setting them up for success on that regard is really critical. So what is it like to build out a team that is fully grant funded? As mentioned early on, I think a lot of grants exist to support individuals, but they don't really offer what's needed to build a full team of engineers, right? So like, especially if you want to, like nerd snipe a bunch of engineers from like top tier companies, you're gonna have a really hard time. I think you have to approach recruiting differently. One thing it is interesting though, is that milestone-based grants offer a path towards growing a team that's based on merit. So if you have like actual milestones you're targeting, and like you have very clear, delineated, grants for each milestone, then the team has a direction. The team has something to aim for. And as mentioned previously, I think that the best talent really wants to work with like-minded people on hard problems. So I think using that to your advantage on recruiting is very important. We've been very lucky that every time we put out a notice for recruiting, we get some amazing individuals that we would never have imagined would apply for us if we were just working, say, on let's say like a traditional startup, right? Just the quality of people is really amazing, and the quality of people that's out there is really amazing. Additionally, empowering newcomers is something that is underrated, I think. Public goods funding would benefit a lot from being accompanied by mentorship. So having like apprenticeship from top tier developers is a great way to onboard talent, right? I believe the Ethereum Foundation recently launched a core developer apprenticeship program where they have a legendary ETH dev, Piper Merriam, that basically mentors basically a cohort of people that apply to this program to learn everything there is about the core blockchain infrastructure, how to write code for it, where to contribute. And awesome is that some of those graduates from the first cohort already have received offers of employment in the industry. So these are people that just came in knowing next to nothing, and now they're we're minting new core devs with these programs. So additionally, I think encouraging teams to apply to the hardest problems is a really huge deal. I think that grantors have the incentive to tackle the hardcore parts of their project in-house. So say like you have some breakthrough innovation, right? Like you're gonna probably want to build that yourself. However, outsourcing to grantees offers really good benefits, right? If you encourage the community to build the infrastructure of your protocol, that leads to further decentralization, and that's very special, right? Like in ETH2, for example, we have 5 teams in production today that have an implementation of the protocol, not just Prism, right? We have teams that that write their implementation in different programming language. They come from different perspectives, different countries, different motivation, and I think that's really nice. Like it's a protocol that has many implementations. And when you outsource something like that to the community, you stand a lot to gain from it. So yeah, so there are these are some of the teams that are currently in production today. There's one not pictured is Lodestar, which is a JavaScript client that is doing a lot of good work for browser tools for Ethereum and the next generation of the blockchain. And I think it's very important to build long-term incentives. So we want to make sure that their work is recognized and impactful. As a grantee, that can make a world of difference. If you know that basically what you're doing, the community appreciates it. They see you. They see the work that you put out, and they can actually see the results along the way. That's massive, and especially having an endorsement from the grantors and the people that are funding this team makes a big difference. But of course, we need better incentives than just cash. Although cash does go a long way, I think some of the ideas that are going to be presented today are extremely interesting. I'm not nearly as qualified to talk about them, but I know there's been a lot of discussion about how to best allocate money from DAO treasuries, how to do vested token schedules, like native token vesting offered by the project's foundation. I think is a really great way to align these long-term incentives. And we built out incentive models over the last 100 years of corporations and startups, but we have far more transparent methods now with Web3 that we should be utilizing more. So I'll leave that to the other speakers, of course. And one more thing is you want to foster healthy competition in a public goods environment. So I think for us in the beginning, when we first started, there were almost 10 teams doing the same exact thing, right? So like that was a really good push for us to work harder and to really ship faster and do things differently. By doing this, I think you get a very strong system where different solutions come to a similar problem, and you can adopt parts from both. You can also have teams that you also have an external driver for teams to compete and do better, right? Instead of just knowing that if you do put in some base on the work, you'll get the next grant milestone, knowing that there is no guarantee of the next grant milestone because there are so many other great people. That adds some layer of pressure that I do think is important for having a team really grow. And finally, we want them to become sustainable, right? So we want to, grant funding is not forever. It's important to continue retaining the talent and helping building out the promise of the project in the first place. So I'll wrap this up and then it opens up some questions. But for some teams out there that are considering, applying for grants, is really consider what are the problems that you care about the most. Think about long-term plays. So like, if I work on this major problem, right, I might not see results until 2 to 3 years from now. But once I do, it'll be massive. Seek the hardest problems and you'll find motivated individuals to join you, and really seek opportunities for mentorship. And ask if the grant program you're applying to offers this. I think these are things that will be net multipliers for your career if you are breaking into Web3 and trying to work in like public goods ecosystems. Great, so I'll leave it with my contact info. We'd love to open it up to any questions from the audience. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Raul, for going into the elements of building a public goods funding system, from creating incentives to building a team to empowering newcomers. I think we have time for one question. We'll go with Decentralist Dan. Asks, do you see teams building public goods being able to fund development by staking their grant funding on ETH2, and using rewards for funding into the future?
Good question. I think like putting up your grant funding, like at risk, it could be a gray area. I think we, for example, definitely stake a lot of our ETH. I think the team personally does. And I think, but there are of course some conditions on grants, right? You can't just like use all your grant funding to go and gamble on DeFi or do other stuff like that. So you have to be careful. You have to make sure you maintain a sustainable runway for your team and make sure that you have enough to sustain yourself. But I do think that, like I said, native token vesting allocations, having incentives built into native tokens is really important. Like knowing that if we succeed, then ETH staking succeeds, and therefore Ethereum succeeds, is a really great way to align our incentives. And really the best way to do that is by holding the coin, by staking the coin, Like I said, we do that. Like the majority of what I own is staked on ETH, and like I'm not afraid to admit it because I'm working on it, and I think it's the ultimate skin in the game. So yeah.
Thanks again, Raul.